Just outside of downtown Kingston, Jamaica, sits Port Royal. It has a pretty cool history. Originally named after Lord Cromwell, this fort was built in 1655 after the British failed to seize Hispaniola from Spanish control. The fort was later renamed Fort Charles. The land on which this fort was built is constantly shifting. In fact, the harbor water almost touched the front of the fort, and boats would pull right up to the walls, directly in the face of 17 guns. Eventually, there were 104 guns and 500 men garrisoned at this fort, which is only one fort of the 6 forts that had been built on this peninsula. One of the fort's commanders was the famous Admiral Horatio Nelson, who had been instructed to defend the Jamaican port from an anticipated French invasion. The invasion never happened, and Admiral Nelson eventually got a new ship and went on to other commands. One of the white buildings you see here in the fort houses a maritime museum relating to Port Royal. It includes items that were recovered from parts of the nearby sunken city, which I believe is the only sunken city in the Western Hemisphere. In the early 1800s, Port Royal was seen as the capital of Jamaica and one of the wealthiest cities in the Caribbean. It was also well known for its English-sponsored privateers, many of whom eventually became pirates. In fact, although it is widely reported that Henry Morgan, the namesake of Captain Morgan Rum, was a pirate, he was actually a privateer and was authorized by the King of England to attack Spanish ships. He eventually became the Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica, with his office in Port Royal, and Captain Morgan oversaw part of the fort's construction. These round towers at the corner of the fort were called comfort houses. They were built over the water at the time and allowed the soldiers to relieve themselves directly into the water. I would hate to have been in a boat under one of these towers at the wrong time. The people you see taking measurements were preparing for renovations to the fort. The government is restoring parts of the fort which have been damaged over time. Many of the cannons here now are actually on loan from other forts around Jamaica, but they do provide an impressive show of the firepower this fort must have had in its day. From above, you can see that this fort was actually built in the shape of a ship. Not only were there a lot of privateers and pirates, there was also a lot of bars and brothels in Port Royal. Supposedly, the concentration of pirates and bars and brothels in Port Royal was the inspiration for scenes in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that in one corner of the fort you'll see a white tower. That tower is not part of the original fort, but was built much later for a scene in a James Bond movie. And it's still there today. Here you can see one of the below-grade cannon locations facing the open water to the south. The cannon is massive. I was told it could hit targets many miles away. Given its size, I believe it. In the distance, you can see a similar cannon site on the grounds of the Jamaican Coast Guard's headquarters next door. The cannon would remain below ground when it wasn't needed, and it was on a turret. It was connected by ropes tied to iron rings which were set in the walls so that the soldiers could raise, lower, and turn the cannon however they needed. Tunnels were also built to go from one cannon location to another so that the soldiers were protected during any firefight. Near the cannon site is the Armory building, now called the Giddy House. In 1907, a second large earthquake hit Jamaica and again sank many of the buildings, including a portion of the Giddy House. It's now tilted at almost a 45-degree angle. I was told the name Giddy is from the feeling you get if you try to stand straight in this building. Okay, although Daniel is playing soldier here, I don't believe this fort was ever involved in any real battle. If you come to Kingston, be sure to check out Fort Charles. It's worth the trip. Also, keep an eye out when you walk around. There are still old cannons and pieces of the former city which occasionally resurface. Reminds us, there's still a lot that we are learning from this place. All right, stick around. You've been watching the old, now you're going to see some new. Thanks to the Jamaican Port Authority, I was able to capture these aerial images of the construction of Kingston's very first cruise ship terminal. It looks much different now, but it has the first floating and articulating pier in the Caribbean. It's called the Sea Walk. You can see it folded here. The pier had to float because it is over the sunken city, and the Jamaican Historical Society wanted to make sure the site was not damaged by the construction of a normal pier. I believe these may be the only aerial shots of the new terminal under construction. Because the soil here is mostly sand, and because the British settlers built their heavy brick buildings on that shifting sand, when a huge earthquake struck in 1692, the sand and ocean water mixed, causing the sand to liquefy and sinking the northern half of the city right into the bay. It's now the only sunken city in the Western Hemisphere, but if you're able to dive or snorkel over the sunken city, you can still see parts of the walls of those old buildings. Okay, that's it. I hope you enjoyed Fort Charles.